Hello, it's Joe, and this is going to be my October wrap-up. So I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in October, except for the first one, which I actually read at the end of September. However, I really loved it and really want to talk about it, and so I'm going to do it anyway and include it in this October wrap-up, so I hope you don't mind. And that book is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. If you don't know, this is a book following a girl named Lara Jean Covey, who basically writes a bunch of letters to all her crushes throughout her life in order to get over them, but she never actually sends the letters, she just writes them as a sort of closure. But one day they accidentally get sent out and all the crushes get the letters and shit goes down, basically. I don't want to give away any more than that for those who haven't read it, but for those who have, you know what happens, obviously. I gave this 5 stars because honestly I thoroughly enjoyed this and it made me so happy. I read it in less than 24 hours because I listened to it on audiobook while I was reading it, and I listened to it on 2 times speed, so I flew through it. And it's just such a cute, fun and happy read overall. I thought the plot was great, the characters were great, the writing was great, and the setting, the voice, everything, it was all great and I loved it all. One of the best parts about this book was the family dynamic, especially between Lara Jean and her 2 sisters, Kitty and Margot. I thought that was really well done. The only thing that bothered me a little bit while reading this book was Lara Jean's dad wasn't very developed at all, and he was extremely lenient with Lara Jean and her sisters, and to the point where it really wasn't believable. I mean, I know some parents are quite lenient with the children, but I feel like this was just a bit too far. But that's a really minor thing because the dad played 0 role in the plot, and yeah, so I managed to really love the book despite that. As you probably already know, this book was adapted into a Netflix original film, and I watched the film immediately after finishing the book and absolutely loved it as well. There are a few things that they changed that were for the better in my opinion, and a few things that were changed that weren't quite as good, but overall it was a really good adaptation and I definitely recommend it if you haven't checked it out already because it's really good. Okay, so the next book I have to talk to you about is actually the first book that I read in October, which is Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And again, I gave this book 5 stars out of 5 because I loved it so much. And I really wasn't expecting to love it actually. If you don't know, this book is about a woman named Eleanor Oliphant who is a bit of an oddball. She basically goes to work every day, except the weekends obviously, and then at the weekend she drinks vodka and eats pizza and basically does that every single week, every single day of her life, and that's it. And then one day she sort of discovers that, hang on, there might actually be more to life than going to work and coming home and getting drunk. Honestly, Eleanor is what made this book so good. She was such a distinct and unique character. I've never read a character like her in my life. She was funny and odd and blunt, and she was just so caring, and I just loved her so much. I loved reading about her, and I thought that Gail Honeyman constructed Eleanor's voice extremely well. And I also listened to this one on audiobook. Whoever narrated it, and I can't remember the name of who it was, but they did a fantastic job of it because it was so good. Eleanor is honestly a superb point of view character. She has a very unusual but also really endearing way of looking at things, and she's very quirky but also with a really polite mannerisms. You need to read the book and understand how great Eleanor is because she's honestly such a good character. Eleanor's relationship with the other main character, Raymond, was just wonderful to read about, honestly. They were so good to each other, and Raymond really helped Eleanor come into her own, really, and Eleanor actually rubbed off on Raymond a bit as well, so yeah, I think they complemented each other really well. This book was definitely one of the saddest yet also one of the funniest books I've ever read, and the combination of those 2 things was just beautiful, honestly. Who doesn't want to laugh while crying their eyes out? That's just goals. One thing I can't believe is that this is Gail Honeyman's debut novel, I believe, and that just blows my mind because the way this novel is written and structured and the pacing of it is just so well done. Like, it's amazing, honestly. There are several trigger warnings for this book, so I would definitely look those up before going into it. But other than that, I think you'd really enjoy this book if you haven't read it already. It's so good. The next book that I read in the month of October was Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. And of course, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. That's 3 5-star books in a row, which is amazing. If you don't know what this book is about, it's basically about a girl named... what's her name? I don't know. What the fuck's her name? It's basically about a girl named Frances who is head girl and like really smart and clever and, you know, top of the class in school. However, no one knows that she's actually in a fandom. So she follows this podcast called Universe City, and it's basically voiced by a anonymous androgynous person, and she really loves it. And one day she meets this person and things just start to unfold, and I can't really say more than that without giving away spoilers. Like, I really wish I could say more, but rest assured this book is incredible and deserves all the hype that Kat from Paperback Dreams gives it. Right at the beginning of this book, 2 of the characters watch the Digimon movie together, and honestly, that part like touched my soul because the Digimon movie is amazing and I love it so much, and to read about characters in a book loving it so much like blew my mind because I've never read that before, so that was like incredible. Also, it was really interesting to read a book about characters immersed in fandom culture. I don't think I've ever read a book like that before, and knowing quite a bit about fandom culture myself, I thought it was really interesting and rather accurate. This is definitely a book that promotes platonic relationships, which oh my god, I love so much. That's probably the best thing about this book, the fact that the 2 main characters could so easily have been turned into a romance, and it just isn't that. And it's so platonic, and they love each other so much, but not in a romantic way, and it's just fantastic. My favourite character was actually one of the minor characters. Her name's Rain, and she really brought about a different perspective in the book. Like, she wasn't involved in like fandom and stuff like that, and she was quite blunt and honest, and she was a really good friend to Frances, and yeah, she's definitely my favourite character and I loved her a lot. And she also brought about my favourite quote from the book, which was, "He's an absolute cunt," and the person she was talking about was at the time. There's one part in this book that I was not expecting and it broke me. I can't say which part it was without spoiling it, but for those who have read it, it's the part where Aled goes into his house and then comes back out. I can't really say more than that, but basically it broke me and I wasn't expecting it and I cried. The plot of this book is actually really complex, and there are a lot of subplots and things that really shouldn't have worked coming together. However, somehow they did, and whoever edited this book must have done a really good job, because Alice Oseman herself has said that she struggles with plot, and so the fact that there wasn't like huge plot holes that I particularly noticed was great. Another thing I loved about this book is the fact that it's so British. Like, I've never read a book that is so unapologetically British, and I really loved that about it. The diversity in this book was also incredible. I would list off all the things, but I haven't wrote them down and I'd forget them, so just know that it's a very diverse book. And also there are trigger warnings for a lot of things in this too, so again, like with Eleanor Oliphant, I would be mindful of those before jumping into it. But other than that, it's a fantastic book and you should definitely read it as soon as you can. The next book that I read in October that I have to talk to you about is Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is everything. It may just be one of, if not my favourite book I've ever read. I mean, maybe, like, I don't want to say that because maybe not, but it's definitely my favourite standalone book I've ever read, for sure. I just loved it so much. If you don't know what it's about, it's basically follows Monique, who works for a newspaper or a magazine, I believe, and she gets invited to interview Evelyn Hugo, who is a huge Hollywood star, although she's like very old at this time, and no one can ever get an interview with her, but Evelyn insists on Monique doing the interview, and so she does, and basically she tells Monique her life, and her life is insane. The fact that Evelyn chooses Monique and she doesn't know Monique and Monique doesn't know her and there's no like apparent reason for it creates an air of mystery to this book that also creates an underlying current of suspense throughout the book that keeps you wanting to read and not stop, and that's exactly what I did. The book sort of gave me Devil Wears Prada vibes. Like, it wasn't similar in terms of plot, but I don't know, something about it just gave me Devil Wears Prada vibes, and Devil Wears Prada is like one of, if not my favourite film. It's up there. And I definitely think that the older version of Evelyn Hugo would really get on with Miranda Priestley from Devil Wears Prada. By far the best aspect of this book was Evelyn Hugo herself. She is the best character I've ever read about. She's so nuanced and imperfect and so well developed and has such a unique voice and is so incredible. I can't even talk about her without getting all my words muddled up, and I really can't express how much I loved Evelyn Hugo in this book. One of my favourite things about her is that she's so self-aware, especially, you know, as she's gotten older. She's so aware of her faults, but also acknowledges and, you know, hypes herself up about the, you know, with the good things about her, which I thought was amazing. And just as a side note, Evelyn Hugo is 100% a Slitherpuff, and I will go down with that statement. So if anyone wants to contradict me, we can fight, because it's true. A lot of the characters in this book were good, but another character worth mentioning, apart from the Queen Evelyn herself, is Harry Cameron, who he's basically Evelyn's friend, and he is just such a good friend to Evelyn, and the two of them together just make me so happy, and I love them so much. This book takes you on a roller coaster of emotions, up, down, twists and turns, you know, loop-de-loops, all of that. And I don't know about you, but I love roller coasters, so I was so here for it. But I think the main reason why I love this book, and apart from Evelyn Hugo, the best aspect about it was the fact that it just gives a big fuck you to slut shamers. Evelyn Hugo is so, like, sexually free, if that makes sense. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, but, you know, she sleeps around, she does, and she doesn't apologise for it, and at no point in this book does it make it seem like it's a bad thing, and it's so not a bad thing. Like, slut shaming is one thing that annoys me so much more than almost anything else, and the way it's like handled in this book without actually addressing it directly is just incredible, and I loved it so much. The next book I read in the month of October is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab, this behemoth of a book. This is the final book in the A Dark Shade of Magic trilogy, and so I can't really tell you what this one specifically is about, but if you don't know, A Dark Shade of Magic is a fantasy book set in 4 Londons. So there is Grey London, which is essentially our London, boring London. Red London is rich in magic, and the people are happy, and it's just like a really magical world. whereas White London is more dark and gritty, and there is some magic, but it's sort of corrupt in a way. And then Black London is just like a void. You need to read the trilogy to know what I'm talking about. But rest assured, this series is really, really good. It's the first series that I've read from Victoria Schwab, and I definitely recommend it, especially if you're into fantasy. I gave this one 4.5 stars myself. I read this as a buddy read with Tom from TJ Reads the Stars. We also read the first 2 books in the trilogy together, so it was nice to do the whole trilogy together. This one in particular, without giving away spoilers, obviously was just non-stop action from the get-go and right up until the very end. Like, I felt like I didn't breathe for the whole time. The writing was really nice, the plot was great, I loved the setting, obviously. The characters were good, however I will say that even though I liked a lot of the characters, there wasn't really one character that I adored. Like, there wasn't a character that I felt really attached to and was like rooting for more than anyone else. I was just like, I liked them all. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. This was definitely like an amazing conclusion to the trilogy. However, after reading this book, I definitely feel like the second book in the trilogy was really filler and not needed at all. I feel like the second book could have just been split up and attached some of it to the end of the first book and some of it to the beginning of this one, and made it a really iconic duology, because the second book in general was not my favourite. However, and a lot of people liked it, so don't let me saying that put you off. But reading the second book is definitely worth it to get to this one, because it's really, really good. One thing that I feel like the first 2 books lacked was certain development in certain characters, and this book developed those characters more, which I really appreciated because that was what I wanted. Overall, this series and this book was really good, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't already. And now we're getting on to the books that I read for WitchAthon, which was a readathon at the end of October, hosted by Rhiannon from Crescent Moon Reads. And the first book that I read for the WitchAthon was City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, and I gave this book 4 stars. This is a middle grade about a girl and her family who moved to Edinburgh for the summer, or for a bit, I can't remember how long it was, from the US. And basically this girl can see ghosts. And if you don't already know, Edinburgh is one of the most haunted places in the world, so there's a lot of ghosts to see. And it's just a really fun read, I think. Not scary at all, but reading this around Halloween time was great because of all like the ghosts and stuff. The main thing that I loved about this book was the setting. I go to Edinburgh every year with my family, so reading about Edinburgh in such detail was really, really good, and there were a lot of places in this book that I've been to, so I could picture it like exactly how it is, and I just really loved that about it. The reason I gave it 4 stars and not 5 was because I feel like the plot was kind of squished into the last third of the book. Rather than being built up from the beginning to end, it kind of was squished into the end, so I feel like that could have been a bit better. And also the characters, none of them really stood out to me. They weren't like awful or anything, but they were not super distinctive in my opinion. I listened to this book alongside the audiobook as well, and I thought the audiobook was really good, and I think it really enhanced my enjoyment of the book overall. So if you're going to read this one, I definitely recommend picking up the audiobook too. The next book that I read in October and for the WitchAthon was The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This was the group book for the WitchAthon, so everyone who participated will have probably read it, and I thought this was like a really, really cute book. I gave it 4 stars as well. Basically, it's set in a village where every year a witch comes to collect a baby from the village, so the village has to sacrifice one of their children to this witch in order to, you know, save themselves from the witch, like, killing them all or whatever. However, what really happens is they leave a baby out in the woods and the witch comes along and saves them from being killed in the woods by like animals or whatever, and she finds the babies like a new home on the other side of the forest, and the witch is like really nice. And also the witch feeds these babies starlight, except one, who is the main character of this book, and the witch ends up feeding her moonlight instead of starlight, which imbues her with magical powers and sets off a chain of events, which obviously goes into the main plot of this book, which I can't really tell you about. But yeah, overall I thought this book was really whimsical and cute. I liked the characters, however I feel like a lot of them were kind of two-dimensional. Some of them were really good, like Zan. I really liked Zan, and Glurk, who was more of a concept than a character. I really liked him as well, and a few of the others, but most of the characters, in my opinion, weren't developed as much as I wanted them to be. I thought the writing and like the descriptions and stuff was really lovely in this book, and I know a lot of people loved it. However, this kind of lyrical writing with like hashtag quotable moments is not something that I particularly love. Like, I don't dislike it at all, like it won't put me off, but it's not something that I read and go, oh, that was like really good. But that's just like a personal thing. I watched Rhiannon's live stream about, talking about this book, and she mentioned some good points about it being a middle grade but having like dark elements that kids can actually handle, and themes that should be talked about in middle grade books, and while I do agree with everything she said about that, I feel like for my personal enjoyment of the book, I would have enjoyed this if it had been written as a more young adult kind of book, so gone like even darker and like more brutal. But that's just like personal to me. This is another one that I read alongside listening to the audiobook, and again this audiobook was like amazing. Whoever voiced it, again, I've not written down who it was and I can't remember at the moment, but they were really great. They had really distinctive voices for each of the characters, and I thought it really like enhanced the novel for me. What I would be interested in is another book set in this world, because even though the village and the surrounding woods of this world were like developed well, I feel like the rest of the world, it wasn't really clear. Like, we know there were a few places beyond the forest and things like that, but I would like to see another like story set in this world, to see more of it. And the last book that I read in October for the WitchAthon, and my throat is getting really sore now, so I'm glad this is the last one, is The Diviners by Libba Bray. I buddy read this book along with Emma from Emma's Bookshelves, and we both really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It follows a group of characters in 1920s New York City, I want to say. And basically there are a series of murders going on, and they want to find out, why and who's doing it, that kind of thing. But there's like a paranormal aspect to it, which creates a really fun atmosphere, in my opinion. I thought the first chapter of this book sets a really creepy tone to the book overall, which I really appreciated because it definitely creeped me out. I really enjoyed Evie as a character. She was like the main character, and I thought she was great. She was like sassy and sure of herself, and she knew what she wanted. Like, I thought she was really good. Aside from Evie though, I thought that most of the characters weren't that developed until towards the end of the book, and I found myself not loving some of them as much as I wanted to. For example, Will and Jericho. By the end of the book, I really did not like those two whatsoever. I thought the overall plot of this book was really great, and I liked how it resolved at the end, while also leaving room for more books, and I know there are more books in this series, so I'm really excited to get to those and see how the story develops further. So, those are all the books that I read in October. As you can tell, I didn't rate any of them less than 3 stars, and so I had a really good reading month. I'm really happy about it. Hopefully November is equally as good or even better. I'll be sure to let you know. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you're having an amazing day. Make sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you want to. All my social media links are in the description below. But other than that, thanks for watching and goodbye.